The barrier to entry for music creation has literally never been lower. On the flip side, there's more and more gear to choose from, so we have to spend our time deciding what the right tool for the job is, when we have enough, when we can actually get to creating and stop purchasing things or stop thinking about what's next. The rate that companies are turning out new gear is absolutely terrifying, and what's even scarier is the fact that we're all trying to keep up. So let me share with you my philosophy on buying new gear. If you guys are enjoying the channel and you haven't yet, please consider subscribing down below and ringing the bell so you're notified every time I release new content. Also, feel free to like the video, and if you want to get involved in the comment section down below, I would love to hear from you, and I'm always active down there as well. In my teens and into my early 20s, I used to dream of having a massive vintage guitar collection, amps to go with it, and like a closet full of pedals. Now I see gear as tools to help me express my creativity, to do my job, and to enjoy making music. I attribute my not collecting more gear than I need to these 4 simple questions I ask myself when I want to buy a new piece of gear. So if you're replacing broken gear, that totally makes sense, and I think is almost always justified, especially if you're using it a lot. Where things get a little bit murky is, what do you replace it with? Do you replace it with the same thing you had, or are you going to get something better? Are you going to use the same brand, or are you going to get a different brand? When this happens to me, I sit down, I make a list of the things I liked about it, and I try and find out if it was actually inhibiting my creative process in any way. I also consider, will it still be relevant in a couple of years from now, or is it smarter to move into something that's newer? As an example, right at the beginning of COVID, my Audient ID14 interface broke. It sounded good. It just didn't have any extra bells and whistles, and at this point I was still using a really basic $100 condenser mic, but I knew I wanted to be recording more from home for this channel and just for recording projects, so I was going to be upgrading my mics a little bit and looking into some preamps. I'd already been looking into the universal audio stuff a little bit, and this presented a really great opportunity for me. If I was just going to replace that Audient unit, it meant that I was going to have to go and get some separate pre's likely if I was going to want to try and color the sound in any way, and I thought it was a really good time to look into universal audio. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while because I really want to keep my setup as small as possible and have as few moving parts to break as I can. At that point, I decided to upgrade to the Universal Audio Apollo Twin. That way I could use the software emulations of preamps that in the long run were going to be a lot more affordable and for me a lot easier to use. Something worth mentioning too is that I'd already been working on recording as a craft for a couple of months at that point. I knew it was something I really liked. It was something I was doing a lot of, and it just made sense to invest at that point. Which brings me to my next point. Does it support your current or future musical goals? I always like to think about where I want to be in 3 or 5 years from now when I'm bringing in new gear to my studio. For me lately, it's all about doing more with less stuff that can break, and recently something I'd been investigating was getting an all-in-one guitar modeler unit. For a couple years, I've been using the HX Stomp on a pedal board with a bunch of other pedals and either running it direct into an amp or running it into a PA system for live gigs and recording. Now, this wasn't something I had to rush into because gigs were kind of slow because of COVID, so I didn't need to go out and get it right away. However, I thought it was a really good time to do so because it would give me some time before gigs came back to actually really get to know the unit. So as luck would have it, shortly after I got the unit, I got a call for a last minute gig, and I was able to put together some sounds in the Helix almost immediately, take the unit out to the gig and never have to worry about it, and actually just enjoy the making music part instead of worrying about whether my gear was going to work. Another question I like to ask myself is, will this noticeably improve the quality of my work? An example that comes to mind is when I bought the HX Stomp. That's the first time I ever really got to hear good guitar modeling. Up till then, I was using GarageBand. Now, I didn't actually buy the HX Stomp for that reason. I bought it for the multi-effects and not having to be buying and selling different modulation pedals whenever I needed them. But that was huge for me. The sound was just like nothing I'd ever heard, and it made me want to play more and more and more. Now, obviously, practicing is going to have a far bigger impact than buying any new piece of gear to the quality of your sound, but sometimes that piece of gear can jumpstart the practice because you like what you hear. Another example is after I bought the interface, I needed to upgrade some microphones. I was starting to work more with clients in my studio, and I was wanting to do more and more remote guitar recording. I was still using $120 Audio-Technica AT2020. I spent a lot of time researching microphones. I knew I wanted to have some small diaphragms and a large diaphragm, so I ended up investing in the small diaphragms for my acoustic guitar, And then when it came time to buy a large diaphragm, I actually decided to go with the Townsend Labs Sphere modeling mic because I thought for the money, I'd get way more out of it than any other one microphone. Something else that was fantastic about that purchase was, as someone who's relatively new to recording, I didn't know what a U87 versus a U67 sounded like, so having this microphone has also let me understand what different microphones sound like and how you can use different microphones on different sources to achieve different feelings. Now, not only did that improve the quality, but it also improved the productivity, which is the next thing I asked myself. So if we go back to the example of the Sphere microphone, absolutely, it's a total no-brainer. If I can just put the mic on the guitar, get it to sound pretty good, get the part down, and worry about choosing a microphone after the fact, that means I can get my ideas down while they're fresh and I'm feeling inspired, and I don't have to fiddle with gear as much, which is something that we all tend to do. I know I'm really guilty of it, and that was just an absolute game changer for me. Let me give you a different example. In the How Many Guitars Do I Need video, I talked about wanting 3 acoustics. I found that 3 guitars is the sweet spot because it allows me to keep one in standard tuning. I keep one a whole step down so I can access some different keys in like the shape of G or wherever I want to, and also I keep one in Nashville tuning so I have a wide array of sounds. So far it's working the way I thought it would, and whenever I get a song, even if it's in an odd tuning, or say it's a half step down, and so the song is actually in the key of F sharp instead of G, I can actually just grab my whole step down guitar, throw a capo on one, and be playing G shapes because that's a sound we really, really like on acoustic guitar. So it just gives me all kinds of flexibility when I'm creating guitar parts, and I don't really have to stop and retune guitars ever. Those are the big ones I ask myself, but there's something else I always like to try and consider, and it's, do I actually have the space for it? And I mean that in the sense of physically, financially, and time-wise. So the space one's pretty easy. Do I have room to fit it in the studio, or is it gonna have to live in a case in the basement? I know for me, if I have a guitar stored away in the case, I'm not going to use it as often. I need to have them out all the time where I can grab them. So asking yourself whether you actually have room for it realistically where you are right now is important. And then financially, do I have the space for it? Is it easy, or is it going to be stressful to put down the money up front? And then also, can I afford to maintain it? Sometimes we forget about the ongoing cost of owning a guitar, as cheap as strings or as expensive as having frets replaced eventually, but even just things like having the guitar set up a couple of times a year so it's in optimal playing condition. Lastly, time-wise, can I afford it, or do I have space for it? So changing the strings on another guitar and all of the maintenance you might do yourself at home on another guitar, those are all really, really important, and that's something I never really considered until I started getting some more guitars. For a long time, I just had 2 electrics and 1 acoustic, and as I started accumulating a couple of more, I'd go to grab a guitar and it would have dead strings, or the setup would be bad, and I'd have to spend time getting it ready before I used it, instead of just grabbing something that was always ready to go, because it was one of the main things I was using and I always had time to set it up. Now obviously your needs are different than mine. Maybe these questions work for you, or maybe not, but I would encourage you to think when you go to purchase a new piece of gear, why you really need it. Ask yourself some important questions, figure out what you need it to do, figure out what you want to be doing. And at the end of the day, I think we all just want to be happy and enjoy creating music. So as always guys, thank you so much for your time and attention in such a noisy world, and until next time, I hope you get out there and make some music.